You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics and public policy and economics and everything. Everything you want to know, just stay tuned. I mean, we're taping this show on March 17th, on the Sabbath, so to speak, a Saturday, which is holy, right, John?
St. Patty's Day is particularly holy. Everybody's Irish.
It's the holiest day. I was going to say the holiest damn day in the year, but I censored that. But it's the holiest day in the year. This is sort of like an oxymoron to say holiest damn day in the year. So what do you want to know? Look, folks, if you're watching this show, you want to know some economics, some law, some really important stuff. I mean, John Tillman is the chairman and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. He has dramatically changed the organization over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. But more about that, because you don't want to hear that. You want to hear from John Tillman. Well, if you're so smart, John, why am I paying $4.30 for gasoline when just 2 years ago it was under $2 per gallon, wasn't it? $2.50?
It was something like that, yeah.
So it's more than double.
Do you think it's all President Obama's fault?
I don't know, John. That's why you're here. I'm going to ask you, why are we paying?
By the way, I don't hold the title chairman. I'm CEO. Just want to make sure we're
You used to be chairman.
One time I was, but I've
Somebody else hold it?
happily relinquished that title.
Who's now chairman?
Andy McKenna is chairman.
Congratulations, Andy. I come to the show and I get information. Tillman wouldn't want to tell me before. Let's make Berkowitz look like a jerk and then say something
But
wrong.
let's talk about about gas prices.
Congratulations, Andy. I'm sorry for getting that wrong. Andy McKenna, of course, well-known man around the state of Illinois.
Yes,
Congratulations. He is now chairman of the Illinois
Yes,
Policy
he is.
Institute.
Let's go to gas prices, though, because I think it's a very important topic. Here's what I think is so interesting about gas prices. When people talk about it, they always talk about drilling more. We need to drill more offshore. We need to how do they call that? Fracturing. Fracking, rather, is the phrase, right? And oil shale and all the rest of it. I'm for all of that. We need to obviously have more domestic supply. But the story really needs to be told about gas prices at the pump, the working class and poor who are at the gas pump, and when you start spending $65 to $75 to fill up your tank instead of $35 or $40 to fill up your tank, it has a material impact on people's ability to buy groceries, put food on the table for their kids. And the reason this is happening is because of the policies of President Obama. He is the one who is accountable. He has shifted tremendous amounts of federal resources to subsidized what he likes to call green energy, which is more expensive and does not begin to make a dent in fulfilling the supply of energy for this country.
But in the long run, let me just interrupt to say, John, because people like to hear this in bites, and to digest all of what you're saying, we're going to make sure they don't choke, especially some of the liberals
Are you
and people on the
implying that
left.
was a fire hose?
I'm just saying people on the left may disagree with you, and they may say, Jeff, why are you letting this guy rant? They want me to interrupt you from time to time.
I'm ready for the argument.
And ask you, what about the long run, John? Because we should care about our grandkids, and we should care about all the terrible things they would say will happen if we still continue to have a carbon-based energy source like oil. We've got to get onto clean forms of energy so 20 years later our kids aren't choking, so to speak, in the air, from the dirty air, whatever.
The best way to accomplish all of the total sort of human condition improvements that we want, not just in terms of pollution from energy sources. There's all kinds of pollutions. There's visual pollution. Eagles are being killed by wind turbines on a regular basis out in California and other places, state of Washington. There's all kinds of impact from the green energy that people don't want to account for. When you have a Prius or another Chevy Volt, those are all powered by electricity that you plug into a wall. A little over 50% of our electricity that powers those green cars comes from coal plants. So the idea that just because it's electric that means it doesn't have a carbon footprint is false. The bottom line
isn't there clean coal as well? And are all those plants clean coal, or are they dirty coal?
It's all over. There's all kinds of coal. I mean, there's different kinds of coal. Some of it burns more cleanly than others. But that's really all of these are red herrings to the real issue.
Well, let me ask you one thing, and then you go on. But it's relevant to your point because you said it's the Obama administration that's responsible for these high prices.
In part, I mean, no one thing is responsible. Certainly, President Obama has put a chill on exploration in the Gulf. Exploration. The governor of Virginia would like to explore outside of on the coastal shelf outside of Virginia, and the Obama administration has prevented that. They are hostile to bringing on more domestic supplies. They are taking credit for some of the new domestic supplies, particularly natural gas, that are all the result of the Bush administration. So the main.
Let me just take that in bites, because you referred to the Gulf and you say they put restrictions on that after that Gulf incident, right?
Right.
Take this that one factor. If they hadn't put those restrictions on there, some would say, wouldn't the impact on current, that was only 2 years ago, right?
Right.
The impact on current supplies would be minimal. Worldwide, there's a world price. And so if they hadn't done that, wouldn't you say yes, the supply would be a little larger coming out of there, but in terms of the world supply, in terms of the world price, you know, the critics of what you said would say that's a drop in the bucket. That can't explain prices going from $250 to $430 in 2 years, can it?
That's, as I said before, there's many factors.
Okay, but how many are you going to list here for the Obama administration? Just stick to the Obama administration. And you've listed one. You said, okay, this change.
In general, the Obama administration has stopped domestic exploration, which is the easiest, least cost source of natural gas, and not natural gas, of oil that can be refined in this country and put into the supply chain of this country. The easiest oil for us to get is from our own domestic supplies and from Canada. We haven't even started talking about the pipeline from Canada and the oil shale coming down through the states that they've put the brakes on. The bottom line is the Obama administration has been hostile to every aspect of new domestic exploration.
Well, let's be empirical.
Which is driving up cost in addition to what's going on in the world energy markets, which is also a huge factor.
But we come back to this, you know, we can get a shot of our favorite book to mention here, Capitalism and Freedom. That's Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman. And we say this with all due respect because folks, if you haven't read this book, I advise that you spend some time with it, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, or whether you're a liberal or a conservative. I think there are many in all of those groups who haven't read this book. It's a classic, I think, written probably 50 years ago. The basics of price theory are here, the basics of demand and supply, the basics of what John Tillman is talking about in this book, right, John?
Yes, absolutely.
And you've read this book, right?
I've read most of that book.
Okay.
Over many years.
Over many years, so it takes a while to absorb, and there's nothing wrong with that.
It's not exactly, you know, it's not like a Vince Flynn book that you just turn over a weekend.
But the serious thing here is that what this man would say to you, John, if he were here, I think, and I knew Milton Friedman, he would say, you have to be a little bit more empirical in what you're saying. So he might ask you, even though he might agree with you, but he might be challenging to you and say, roughly over the last 2 years, what decrease in domestic production has the Obama administration caused in oil? Would you say oil production domestically in the last 2 years is 10% lower as a result of their policies? 20?
Jeff,
can you give me some ballpark range? Because if
no,
it's 2%, it's not credible to say that they've significantly affected the world price of oil. Do you see my point?
I do, but I think that point's not relevant to what the discussion is, with all due respect to you. The point is, what is the price of gasoline at the pump? And it's higher than it's been in years. And the question you asked is, why is that? There are many reasons why, which is what I said earlier. Okay. And it comes down to what Milton Friedman taught. It comes down to supply and demand. And part of that equation is anticipated future cost of the energy replacement source. So if you're pumping out gasoline from your tank today, and you're going to replace that next week, do you think that price next week is going to be more or less than today? If you think, even though you might have paid less for the gasoline in your tank today, you will raise your price. That's one factor, so anticipated cost down the road. The second factor is worldwide demand and how important that is, China and all the other growing markets around the country. The third thing, obviously, is the unrest. But the number one issue in this country—
Unrest in?
The Middle East and the threats to close the Strait of Hormuz.
In Iran and all that
stuff. In Iran and all the things that in general are going on in the Middle East. But the number one issue that we have control over is, do we have an expansive view of maximizing domestic production of energy? The Obama administration is hostile to that. That has an effect on price. That is all I'm saying, and that is the main thing that he's accountable for. The other thing that you can really get into esoteric discussion about this, about currency and the absolute inflationary policies of this administration and the Fed, the effect, if you actually took oil prices and compared it in terms of units of value to silver or gold, they actually are moving in opposite directions right now. So there's a lot of things going on here, but the number one thing this administration could do is expand domestic exploration, which would help drive down cost in this country.
So to be clear, and I don't know exactly, I should have checked before what the price was 2 years ago, but roughly I think it'd be fair to say it was hovering in the $2 per gallon range. Because not too long ago, actually we're taping the show again on March 17th, and not too long ago I was talking about the price roughly doubling from about $1.80 to $3.60. So not too long ago, and I'm talking maybe in the last month. I should be a little more diligent to make sure. Last month, I think prices that I and you were paying were probably in the range of $3.60, $3.70.
What I think is so—
They've gone up tremendously in a month, but my point to just make sure, get it right, as to what you just said. Show, despite what some people think, the show is not about Jeff Berkowitz. It's about John Tillman.
No, it's about your viewer. It's about your viewers.
And our viewers, and what they might be asking, I think, and I try to ask what they would be asking. So what you're saying, John, is not that Obama has raised the price from roughly $2 per gallon to $4 per gallon for gas.
Right.
but he's had a significant impact on that increase. But you're conceding a large chunk of that increase is due to other factors, disruptions or uncertainty in the Middle East, the growth in demand for energy in other areas outside the United States. So you're saying, but a large chunk of that $2 increase is your assertion that the large chunk of that is attributable to Barack Obama's policies, which have limited the supply of oil and other energy coming out of the United States?
That would be, in a nutshell, yes.
Okay.
And I think what's interesting is how it's being played. In 2008, when we had $4 gas, it was President Bush's fault. Today, in 2012, when we have $4 gas, there's nothing the president really can do about it. I just think that's interesting. Go back and look. Do a LexisNexis. See how the story was covered.
And see what? Oh, you're saying.
See how the story was covered in terms of
when
presidential.
Bush prices were covered.
See how the story was covered in terms of administration and presidential accountability for $4 gas in 2008 versus today. It's just interesting.
See, then they said that was President Bush's fault when the price was going up when he was president. Now you're saying much of the mainstream media would be saying this is something that the presidential administration
it's out of his control. It's a world market.
So you're saying that would indicate to you some bias toward the left by the mainstream media? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I would say, yes.
Okay.
Story choice and framing of the story.
So would we invite, if we have students, say, at the Medill School of Journalism who might be watching this, I know I've talked to some as they cover events, and so that's, of course, the School of Journalism at Northwestern. So if you're watching this show, we invite you to take a little poll of your faculty members at the Medill School of Journalism. Just ask them a cross-section. There must be like 20 people who teach there. I think John McCarran, teaches there. He's a former Chicago Tribune columnist. Just do a poll and say, do you think that this is something, ask them two questions. When prices were increasing for gasoline, oil, some portion of the period, when Bush was president from 2001 to 2008, did you folks say that the cause of that was the Bush administration? They weren't doing the right things. If they did, they could affect the price and keep it down. And then ask them what they've been saying in the last year or two with Obama there. And if you see a difference, what do we conclude from that? Is that your point?
That's my point.
That would be an empirical way.
You could actually just go back and look at the news reporting. Go look at how the AP reported that story, the New York Times, or anybody. It's interesting to me, although I think there's other issues that are even more important. But gas prices are crucial.
And we'll get to John Tillman and the Illinois Policy Institute, you can tell from their name, focus on Illinois issues. And we'll get to that, folks. We're not going to put
We love the national stuff, too, though.
But one other thing we just want to cover while we're on national issues, we're taping this on March 17th. Some of you folks will see it before it airs on cable. You may see it on our website, youtube.com, Public Affairs TV, youtube.com/Public Affairs TV. And so if ever you don't get to see it, you're not outside our viewing area, and you happen to be watching it now in our viewing area, but maybe you're just walking through, you can always find our show, and sometimes much sooner than it's on cable. You can find it by going youtube.com/Public Affairs TV. And so you may be seeing us taping this show on March 17th, and then you would know the election in Illinois is March 20th. And it's an unusual election because this is the first time in a quarter of a century, John, that presidential politics has been sort of mattered by the time we got to the Illinois primary.
Presidential primaries,
Republican or Democrat.
Right. I don't remember a time. I've lived in Chicago since 1985, and I don't remember a primary. There may have been one, but I don't remember one where the primary still mattered. Usually the nominees are chosen by now, and or the state was going to clearly go one way or the other. So I think it's been a very interesting time.
And would you say there are 4 presidential candidates in the Republican primary now? Mitt Romney.
Yeah. To be clear, President Obama will win the primary in Illinois.
You make that a flat-out prediction.
Absolutely.
You put your house and golf on the line right there.
Yes.
Your wife and daughter, the whole thing.
Yes. Let's not go into that.
You are that confident, okay,
yes.
that Obama will win the primary, the Democratic primary.
Pretty confident.
And will you also say, unequivocally, he will win his race for re-election in 2012?
I would not say that.
But you would say he's an odds-on favorite as of March 17th?
Every incumbent president in an election year is, no matter what the polls say, is a favorite.
Okay. But not a prohibitive favorite?
No, I think it's going to be competitive.
Okay. And so in this race for president in the Republican primary in Illinois, we have Mitt Romney, of course, the former governor from Massachusetts. It sounds so odd to say that, but it's true.
It's true.
We have Rick Santorum, former U.S. senator from Pennsylvania. Doesn't sound that odd. We've had that Republicans as senators from Pennsylvania. In fact, Rick was there, I think, for 18 years as senator.
Something like that, yeah.
Maybe might include his time in the House. And of course, we have Newt Gingrich, the former U.S. Speaker, and then Ron Paul, the perennial candidate from the Libertarian Party, who's become much more of a force this year than he had been in other years in terms of affecting the debate.
I think Ron Paul's brought some very important policy thinking to the primary, and I think he's really resonated with a very significant part of the Republican primary electorate. It's been very interesting.
Well, you in the Illinois Policy Institute are sympathetic with many of his ideas, especially on the domestic side, because you promote, we should say the Illinois Policy Institute bills yourself, labels yourself as a libertarian think tank, right? In part,
actually,
liberty-oriented think tank. Don't you say that?
We talk about advancing a liberty agenda. We don't use labels like that, although people often do, because we like to focus on liberty-based public policy.
Liberty.
Which is
Excuse me, I should have said that.
Different.
I said libertarian. Right?
I love the term libertarian. I like.
You're not quite completely libertarian. It's liberty-based.
The term I like, Jeff, is conservatarian, because that way I irritate my conservative friends and my libertarian friends.
Okay, but liberty-based think tank. What did you say?
Liberty-based public policy. We champion the free market and liberty-based public policy.
Free market, liberty-based.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so when Ron Paul talks about abolishing the Department of Education, as others have, you would agree with him on that, right?
I'm not going to get into whether or not the federal government should abolish the Department of Education, but I think there's so much more work that needs to be done in the state of Illinois to make education, public education should not be controlled by a public monopoly. And that's essentially what we have today, is that the government is providing monopoly services, and in order to have choice in education, you have to pay twice. You shouldn't have to pay twice. You shouldn't have to pay with tuition and your property taxes. The money should follow the child, and the parents and the children should be empowered to choose a school that's best for them, whether that's a government school or an independent school.
So basically, folks, I'm the straight man for the show these days. You know, my guests come here and they make points, and I hold up the book that matches the point.
It's an excellent book.
This is School Choice. It's put out by, well, it's written by Herb Wahlberg, who was
did a great job on
with
that
the
book.
Heartland
Yeah.
Institute.
Heartland Institute put that book out.
They've made this copy available. We thank them for doing that. You've read this book?
I have read that book.
Goes through what? Many findings, right?
All kinds of things.
Hundreds of findings, would you say? It's called School Choice, the Findings, right?
Yes.
What's the essence of that book? I should say it's St. Patrick's Day, and this is my green.
Here's a great.
And John's, of course, wearing a green tie if we haven't picked that
up. There's all kinds of things about school choice that I think are amazing. The bottom line is this, just with your audience here in the Chicago area.
Because you were making this point. I just want to say, this is not my point, this is your point, because you're talking about liberty and you start talking about free market. Wasn't this just one step away, school choice?
Yeah.
Okay.
The point is that what liberty is about is empowering people, not empowering government.
Right.
And unfortunately, the original founding of this country, which was based on the idea of liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the Constitution to protect individuals' rights to do that. Unfortunately, now too many people think the government should be the one doing the pursuing. It's individuals should be empowered to pursue their dreams, whether it's their child's education, the business,
the government can empower individuals to exercise school choice. So in a sense, the government can be a liberating influence. And maybe you would join with, because let me see if I could promote a consensus point of view. There are people in this country, many people, maybe even the great majority, who think that kids with low-income parents should be assisted in acquiring an education. Would you say we probably have a majority of people who agree to that?
I think most people believe
a large consensus.
I think most people believe in a civil society. You want to provide every person with a great education, whether they were born.
No, not provide. When you say you.
Provide an opportunity for a great education, whether they were born in a terrible neighborhood on the south side of Chicago or in the North Shore.
Provide an opportunity. So that means if you have low-income parents, you don't have to have a public school to do that. Exactly. You have to have an assistance from the government in financing that. So individuals given money,
right,
say $15,000, which is what we spend per kid per year in the Chicago public schools. So don't give the kids in Chicago a public school to go to. Give them the $15,000, a school voucher, and say, you can use this money, $15,000, at any school of your choice, private or public. So you notice the difference. Financing that education as opposed to providing the education.
Right.
That's why I thought people might misconstrue when you use the word providing. The government's empowering by making those funds available.
That's what I was trying to distinguish when I was saying earlier that it shouldn't matter whether it's about providing an education. We can, the semantics game here, but the point is everyone should have a chance at a great education chosen by the parents. And it doesn't matter whether those parents choose an independent school, a private school, a religious school, or a government school. The government shouldn't have a controlling monopoly. There's something you said earlier, though, that is a very important point, is the government shouldn't be empowering people in the way that you said, and I know you didn't mean it this way, but the government has no right to empower people. When I talk about it's about empowering people, not empowering government, what I mean by that is our empowerment as individuals is sovereign by the Constitution. That's what the idea of unalienable rights means. That's right. The government doesn't bestow upon us our empowerment. We have it by natural law or by God's gift to us, depending on your point of view on that. That's what the Constitution and Declaration are about. So the whole point of government is to create an unfettered society that lets us individually use our own empowerment and our inalienable rights to pursue that. And unfortunately, too many people now think government should make the choices for us and do the pursuing on our behalf.
Right, and I certainly didn't mean to imply...
This is a very esoteric discussion.
But it's not that esoteric because it is important, because John raised this point here, and I'm reaching in my pocket to pull out my pocket Constitution, because I did learn that at the University of Chicago Law School when our constitutional law professor, not Barack Obama, a person somewhat different, Gerhard Casper, who went on to become head of Stanford. But Gerhard Casper, when he taught con law, he would tell us as law school students at the University of Chicago, I wonder if they're teaching this now. He would say, keep that Constitution in your pocket and don't leave home without it.
Right. John,
it's words to the wise. Because this document, which is roughly 20 or 30 pages, even in this size, has the essence of this country, has the essence in its Bill of Rights of what people rely on when they rely on freedom. And there are certain things that the federal government is empowered to do by this document.
Very limited.
Very limited.
Yes.
And the thing is, if they're not empowered to do this by this document, they shouldn't be doing it.
All the powers not enumerated to the federal government are left to the states and to the people, as
That's
specified.
the 10th Amendment
exactly.
of the Constitution. Right?
And unfortunately, the federal government, and to some degree the states, have taken on way too much control over our lives.
But sometimes the federal government can do some good. Maybe you would think this
usually
is going too far.
Usually when they turn off the lights at 5 o'clock and go home.
No, but think about when the Congress, led by Republicans, because Washington, D.C. is sort of an odd deal as a district, and it's actually run in large part by the U.S. House, and I think the Senate, by the U.S. Congress, and they voted to have so-called opportunity scholarships, I would call them school vouchers, for kids in low-income schools or kids in schools whose parents are low-income in Washington, D.C., and this was giving kids a choice. They could take that $7,500, much less than the cost being paid for the public school, and go to the private school of their choice. And one of the first acts of the Barack Obama administration, of Barack Obama by his Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan from Chicago, was to support the repeal of that legislation.
Right, wanted to shut down those kids getting that freedom, that empowerment. It's really, it's one of the best examples of what I think of as the Orwellian nature of this president. He says one thing in public, but then when he has political power, he does something else, and he hurts the very people, in theory, he ran on helping the most, which is the poor and disadvantaged.
And John, I say this with some affection for Barack Obama, because he, as we talked about, did 6 one-half-hour shows here.
Yes, but I've actually been on your show more, I've learned today.
You have been on, but you've had a
longer period. But I will never be president of the United States.
Well, I don't understand, because I tell people if,
Does everybody who comes on your show become president?
I just tell people who decline to come on, remember Barack came on here 6 times and he became president. You're now the counterexample, John. You're undercutting me at every opportunity. All right. No, but seriously, the thing is, I have
some amazing people on this show, seriously.
No, but the point is, in June of 2002, before he was running for the U.S. Senate, Barack Obama said basically, and I have this on tape, people want to see it on video, he would do anything to improve the quality of education for the kids. And I said, even school vouchers. He said, everything has to be on the table. I said, I take that as a yes, and we moved on. A year later, in 2003, now he was a U.S. Senate candidate, and I started talking to him about the school of choice. He said, we don't need to, we've already covered. I said, you might have changed. I said, for instance, do you still support school vouchers? He said, as you know, Jeff, I have not supported school vouchers, I support charter schools.
Right.
But the point is, he had to change, John, because he wanted to win the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate. To have any influence, you understand, you have to win. To win the Democratic primary, he has to make peace with the teachers' unions. It was bad enough they were concerned that he supported charter schools. You might have to concede and acknowledge that's a bit of choice, and that took a bit of courage for Barack to support those. And knowing how important union support was for him.
I would not concede that.
You wouldn't concede that. You wouldn't concede that he upset the teachers' unions by supporting charter schools. You would concede that.
I would not concede that.
You
I don't think it took any courage for Barack Obama to support charter schools. Charter schools, by the time I'm quite serious about this. When Barack
You're
Obama,
heading into your time now, talking about the Illinois Policy Institute
you know
and your budget.
I'm having too much
and
fun
we've only got
talking about
5
this.
minutes, so if we
That's
don't get
okay.
to it.
The short version of it, yes, but well,
okay.
The short version of this is these are important issues, though, actually, because to give a guy credit
We've
and
got
call
4
it
minutes
courageous,
left, so you
call
decide
it
how you want to
courageous
use
when
it.
it isn't courageous is, in my view, wrong. It's not courageous to support charter schools when that's the fallback position that has already the received wisdom of the Democratic political establishment in Illinois. Mayor Daley at the time, the entire Democratic political establishment in the city of Chicago was all in with charter schools and had been for a long time. So there's no particular courage for him to adopt that policy, which had already become settled policy.
In 2002,
absolutely,
in 2002, 2003, there were about 20,000 out of 400,000
That-
students in charter schools.
That's true, but
in Chicago.
The point
that's
is,
not
the
like
point
a big
is,
thing. You
the
know?
point is, the battle had been fought. There was no courage there. What was, in my opinion, what was not courageous was the point that you made that I was going to make, which is he changed his position because he had to consult with the teachers.
Here's my point. The Republicans are in town. It's Illinois. I want to hear how many times in the next 3 days am I going to hear Mitt Romney come out full-throated for school voucher, school choice across Illinois? How many times am I going to hear Newt Gingrich say that? How many times am I going to hear Rick Santorum say it? How many times am I going to hear Ron Paul say it? If I hear these guys say that 20 times in the next 3 days, well, I'll say, well, you have a point. You know, just. The point is, John, you should be on the phone saying, you guys better start saying this because Berkowitz called this to people's attention.
Hey, one thing before your show
No,
ends,
I believe
I do want people to see our
vouchers.
Budget Solutions 2013
right.
because we did put out our 4th annual budget. It cuts and reforms and restructures $7 billion of spending of the state budget. We've done it 4 years in a row. Every year we've balanced the budget. No tax hike. Actually, we repeal the tax hike starting in January of 2013. We make the full pension payments. We start paying down the past due debt. It's the only total solutions package out there that actually balances the budget and repeals the tax hike. People should check it out at IllinoisPolicy.org.
And slow that down. You're saying cut $7 billion, and that means we have a balanced budget. Right now, for what Governor Pat Quinn has, is a balanced operating budget, roughly, but it leaves $7 billion that we owe, right?
Yes. In addition to that, even his balanced operating budget has some mysterious numbers in Medicaid spending.
But it's close to being balanced.
It's out of balance.
Okay. But your point is it's all balanced with what you propose,
yes.
and mainly...
And improves services for the poor and disadvantaged. That's the important part.
And folks, because we didn't get to cover this, which we had anticipated, but the other stuff was just too much fun.
We were having too much fun.
We were having too much fun.
You might not have had fun, but we had fun.
We did, okay. So we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank John Tillman. Thank you so much, John, for
Good to be with you as always.
I only wish I had not squandered the time before the show so you could be here for another show right after.
Well,
you'll come back soon, though.
I'll come back soon.
All right, because it's important that folks go to the IllinoisPolicy.org, which is your website.
Yes.
And they can read the executive summary, 15 pages or less, and they can see these are not draconian cuts.
No.
The $7 billion that you're talking about, you know, there's a lot of money going to high-income kids that should be going to low-income kids. And so part of that funding is to just cut that out.
Yes.
So part of the Illinois funding goes back to the public schools, but it's not to help low-income kids. It's to take money from everybody, which includes low-income people, and give it to higher-income or middle-income people. Right?
Yes. Part of what goes on right now is you have a wealth transfer, ironically, from working-class and poor to the wealthy school districts. We think that should stop.
And that's $1 billion or $2 billion right there. You have what you call sensible spending, which are reasonable cuts in the human services area, and that's about $2 billion right there.
But the biggest one that is important to talk about is Medicaid, because what we propose is a premium support system where Medicaid patients would get an insurance card just like any other patient. They would no longer have the scarlet M on their forehead with a door slammed in their face because the state won't pay Medicaid bills.
So right now, people, you're saying, don't really have access to health care because people see that you're getting Medicaid or Medicare, which is another story, and they just shut you out.
Exactly.
And so there's a crowd-out effect. Then it's the pensions, these elaborate pensions, these costly pensions that are paid to state employees. They're not contributing enough. If you cut that out, then you could give it to the people who truly in need, right?